Ladies and gentlemen, silence is not weakness, it's self-mastery. In a world that constantly tells you to speak up, explain yourself, defend your decisions, and react to everything, choosing silence is one of the boldest and most powerful things you can do. Most people think silence means giving up, that if you're not responding, you're losing. But in reality, silence often means you've already won a battle within yourself. You've outgrown the need to be seen, to be heard, or to be validated by others. You've recognized that not everything needs a reaction, and not every situation deserves your energy. When you stop feeding the noise around you, you give yourself space to hear what truly matters: your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own direction. Think about how often we waste our peace trying to explain our growth to people who aren't ready to understand it, or how often we defend choices we made for our own mental health to people who were never affected by our struggles. That cycle is exhausting. You begin to realize that you're not being silent because you don't have a voice, you're being silent because you no longer feel the need to raise it. That is self-mastery. That is control, that is strength. The truth is, silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's the presence of power. It means you've stopped letting external forces dictate your internal state. You've chosen stillness, not because you're scared, but because you're focused. You're not passive, you're deliberate. You're not avoiding confrontation, you're protecting your peace. When you master silence, you master your energy. And once you do that, everything changes. You begin to move differently. You begin to carry yourself with quiet confidence. You stop seeking validation because your self-worth no longer depends on being seen, heard, or praised by others. This level of inner calm intimidates people who thrive on drama. It confuses those who expect you to react, to argue, to defend. Suddenly, they can't access you the way they used to. They can't throw you off balance. They can't trigger you into losing your cool, because you're no longer operating on their level. You've risen above the noise, and from that higher ground, you can see everything more clearly. You can see the difference between a distraction and a direction. You can tell who adds value to your life and who only adds noise. Choosing silence gives you clarity, and clarity is powerful. It allows you to observe before you respond, to assess situations without being emotionally hijacked. You become strategic with your words, intentional with your energy. You're no longer just reacting to life, you're directing it. And that's when things really begin to fall into place. People start respecting your boundaries, even if they don't understand them. Opportunities begin to show up, not because you shouted for them, but because you became the kind of person who's ready for them. Relationships improve or fall away, both are a win because you finally stop watering connections that only drain you. When you stop explaining yourself, something incredible happens. People start to feel the absence of your energy. They begin to notice the power of your silence. They reflect more deeply on your value. Silence is where your presence becomes louder than your words ever could. People remember how it felt to have you in their lives when you were open, and they feel the shift when you pull that energy back. This isn't about manipulation, it's about alignment. It's about showing up for yourself in the most respectful way possible, by no longer arguing with people about your worth. Some may misinterpret your silence as distance or indifference. Let them. That's not your burden to carry, because your silence isn't about them, it's about you. It's about reclaiming the energy you used to spend on being understood by people who weren't even listening. It's about pouring that energy back into your goals, your healing, your joy, your evolution. And as you do, life begins to realign. Things that felt stuck start to move. Doors you thought were closed begin to open. But most importantly, you begin to feel whole without needing to be heard. This is the shift, from noise to intention, from reaction to response, from proving to simply being. When you operate from this place of silent strength, you don't just change your mind, you change your entire reality. And people will feel it, they'll notice the calm, they'll sense the power, but they won't be able to explain it, That's the beauty of self-mastery. It speaks for itself even when you don't. Focusing inward realigns your external world. It might sound too simple to be true, but the shift that happens when you stop trying to fix everything around you and instead start working on the world inside you is nothing short of transformative. Most people live in reaction. They respond to criticism, chase validation, try to manage relationships that are draining, and seek answers in all the noise outside of them. But the truth is, everything you're looking for starts to find its way to you the moment you turn inward. That doesn't mean becoming selfish or shutting people out. It means prioritizing your peace, your purpose, and your personal alignment so deeply that the outer world has no choice but to adjust to your new standard. When you focus on yourself, you're not ignoring the world, you're changing your lens. You begin to see more clearly what matters and what doesn't. You notice how much time you used to spend overanalyzing texts, over-explaining your emotions, or trying to read into the behavior of others. But once your attention shifts inward, those things start to lose their grip on you. You stop chasing closure from people who were never honest. You stop worrying about being chosen because you've already chosen yourself. You stop getting pulled into energy that distracts you from your growth. This kind of focus isn't easy, especially in a culture that equates constant busyness and overconnection with importance. But it's necessary. Because without turning inward, you can't hear your own voice over the static. You can't know what truly fulfills you when you're consumed by comparison. The moment you begin redirecting your attention to your own healing, your own goals, your own inner peace, things begin to fall into place, not because you're forcing them to, but because you're no longer resisting your own power. Relationships start to shift. You stop trying to keep people who don't try to keep you. You stop needing to explain your boundaries. The people who are meant to walk with you will meet you at your new level. The ones who can't will fall away, and instead of feeling abandoned, you'll feel relieved, because your peace becomes more valuable than anyone's inconsistent presence. Your value no longer depends on how others treat you. It rests on the unshakable foundation you've built inside yourself. Work and purpose begin to align more clearly. When you're not wasting your energy on proving yourself, you can pour that energy into improving yourself, and improvement speaks for itself. You become more creative, more productive, more inspired. Ideas flow more freely because you've cleared space for them. Doors that were once closed begin to open because you're showing up as your highest self, not your most exhausted one. The clarity that comes from inner work allows you to say no with confidence and yes with intention. Your mental and emotional health also stabilizes. You begin to detach from outcomes and embrace process. You start understanding that not everything needs to happen on your timeline, and yet, because you're aligned, more starts to happen in your favor. You're not hustling from desperation, you're moving from alignment, and that energy is magnetic. People notice the change even if they can't articulate it. They feel it in the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you no longer flinch when something doesn't go your way. That quiet confidence is born from doing the inner work. Focusing inward also teaches you how to sit with discomfort. You're not afraid to face your emotions anymore because you've learned that suppressing them doesn't make them go away, it just makes them louder in disguise. You start to welcome your sadness, your anger, your fear not as enemies but as signals, and by sitting with them you gain wisdom. You stop reacting impulsively and start responding intentionally. You become emotionally mature not because you're always calm, but because you understand your storms and no longer let them control you. Eventually, your outer life begins to mirror your inner stability. The people you attract are more aligned with your peace. The opportunities you receive are more in tune with your purpose. Even when challenges arise, and you handle them with grace, because you're no longer running from yourself. You're grounded, centered, and unshakable. So many people wait for life to get better before they get better. But the truth is, life gets better because you get better. When you turn inward, you stop living on the surface. You begin to operate from a deeper, more authentic place. And from that space, you don't chase, you attract. You don't beg, you align. And most importantly, you don't lose yourself trying to fit into a life that was never meant for the person you're becoming. Staying silent is not about becoming invisible, it's about becoming intentional. It's about realizing that not every reaction deserves your words, and not every situation requires your presence. When you stay silent, especially during chaos, you begin to see clearly what noise is worth your energy and what was just a distraction all along. Silence allows you to step back, observe, and understand. It creates space between you and the world's chaos, and in that space, clarity is born. In moments of emotional intensity, when you're hurt, misunderstood, disrespected, or triggered, the instinct is to respond. To speak up, to prove your point, to defend your name, but here's what most people miss. That response often comes from a place of ego, not power, and power doesn't always speak. It doesn't need to. Silence, in those moments, isn't weakness. It's strength in its purest form. It's you choosing peace over noise, presence over performance, and growth over reaction. When you stay silent, you give yourself permission to process rather than react. You pause long enough to examine whether what you're about to say is rooted in truth or emotion. That pause is your protection. It's your moment to reconnect with your values before you speak. And sometimes you'll find that silence says it all. That withholding your words doesn't mean withholding your worth. It means you've recognized your energy is too valuable to be wasted on people who don't listen to understand. Silence also shifts power dynamics. When someone expects you to argue, beg, or defend, and you simply choose not to, they feel it. That absence of reaction forces reflection. Suddenly, they are faced with their own behavior without the distraction of your defense. And that silence can echo louder than any well-crafted speech. It's not passive aggression, it's intentional detachment. It's a signal that you've stopped entertaining dynamics that don't serve your peace. Choosing silence also frees up emotional bandwidth. The time and energy you would have spent going back and forth with someone who doesn't see your value can now be poured into your goals, your healing, your passions. And that redirection begins to bear fruit. You grow faster, you think more clearly, you sleep more peacefully, you create more intentionally, all because you chose not to drain yourself trying to be understood in spaces that never deserved your depth. And here's where everything begins to fall into place. When you stop explaining your worth, you start living it. People begin to notice that you're no longer seeking approval, you're walking in alignment. You're not broadcasting your growth, you're embodying it. That quiet confidence becomes magnetic. The right people start to see you not for what you say, but for how you move. Your peace becomes your power. Your silence becomes your message. You're no longer over-communicating in relationships, trying to teach someone how to love you. You're no longer sending long texts trying to get closure. You're no longer debating your boundaries. You simply remove yourself. You distance, you recalibrate, and your life becomes quieter but also more peaceful, more stable, more joyful. This silence doesn't create loneliness, it creates freedom. Because when you get comfortable with your own presence, you stop tolerating anyone who makes it feel heavy. You stop chasing conversations that drain you. You stop proving your worth to people who overlooked it. You let go of the need to be heard in rooms that were never meant for your voice. And instead, you find power in solitude. In solitude, you meet the version of you that doesn't need external validation. The one that doesn't settle, the one that knows their value without shouting it. Eventually, the world around you adjusts, the noise fades, the chaos clears, and what's left is a life that feels intentional. Relationships that feel reciprocal. Work that feels meaningful. Peace that feels earned. And none of it required fighting to be seen, only the quiet, disciplined choice to stay silent when it mattered most. One of the most overlooked truths is this. When you stop trying to prove your worth to others, You start to see your own value more clearly. And in that shift, something powerful happens. Your energy changes. You're no longer moving through the world seeking validation. You're no longer hoping that someone else's approval will finally make you feel enough. Instead, you start owning your presence in quiet but undeniable ways. This is the moment when people around you start to take notice, not because you're louder, but because you're grounded. There's a confidence that emerges when your self-worth no longer depends on outside affirmation. You walk differently. You speak with clarity, not because you're trying to impress, but because you no longer feel the need to explain yourself. You don't chase conversations or people who can't meet you halfway. You become more selective with your time, more intentional with your decisions, and more protective of your energy. And what's fascinating is how quickly this shift in you changes how people respond to you. The people who once overlooked you start to notice your absence. The ones who took your kindness for granted feel the weight of your distance. You're not being cold, you're being clear. You're no longer sacrificing your peace to make others comfortable. And that silent withdrawal forces others to sit with themselves. While they're sitting, wondering what changed, you're building, you're healing, you're growing, you're evolving in silence, and that evolution speaks volumes. You begin to radiate a new kind of power, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but commands respect. People begin to realize they can't access you the same way they used to, and that realization either inspires them to rise or reveals that they never truly valued you. Either way, the clarity you gain is a gift. You stop wondering where you stand in people's lives because your energy tells you everything. If they match it, they're meant for this next chapter. If they don't, you've made peace with letting them go. In this space, you also begin to attract differently. You're no longer drawing in people who are just intrigued by your light. You're attracting those who understand its value. You're surrounded by fewer people, maybe, but the quality of those connections increases. These are the ones who respect your silence, support your growth, and align with your vision. You don't have to shrink, overgive, or prove anything. You just have to be. This quiet, confident version of you becomes magnetic. Not because you're trying to be, but because you're finally in alignment with who you truly are. And that authenticity is rare. People can sense when someone is living with inner peace, when their actions match their words, when their presence feels grounded and unshaken. They feel safer around you, more drawn to your clarity, and more respectful of your space because you've modeled how you expect to be treated through the way you treat yourself. Ironically, the less you try to be noticed, the more visible you become. Not in a superficial way, but in the way that truly matters. Your presence begins to carry weight, your silence carries meaning, your choices reflect self-respect, and people respond to that. They either meet you with respect or fall away in silence. Both are answers. Focusing on yourself and staying silent isn't about control or games, it's about energetic truth. It's about allowing your evolution to speak for itself. No announcements, no dramatic exits, just a consistent, quiet shift in how you move. The more rooted you are in your worth, the less you feel the need to be loud about it. That grounded energy is what changes everything. And that's exactly why, when you focus on yourself and stay silent, everything truly begins to fall into place. One of the most transformative things you can do in your life is to redirect your energy inward. The energy you once spent explaining yourself, defending your choices, or trying to make others understand you, all of that, when redirected toward your own growth, creates unimaginable progress. That's the silent power behind self-focus. It's not selfishness, it's strategy. Because when you're constantly pouring into others without filling yourself, you're moving on empty, and no one thrives like that. The moment you start focusing on yourself, you start to notice everything differently. You recognize your patterns, the ones that keep leading you back to the same kinds of people, the same disappointments, the same feelings of being unseen or unheard. You become aware of the parts of you that need healing, not from others, but from within. You stop blaming, stop chasing, and start owning your narrative. You no longer make your happiness someone else's responsibility. That kind of internal shift is revolutionary, and the silence that accompanies it is not just the absence of noise, it's the presence of intention. In that silence, you begin to hear your own voice again. You start to realize what you actually want, not what you've been conditioned to want. You start reconnecting with your dreams, your standards, your boundaries. You begin to set goals based on your fulfillment, not on impressing others. And this creates a ripple effect. As you rise, everything misaligned starts to fall away. When you operate in this space, you no longer feel the need to convince anyone of your worth. You no longer over-explain why you chose to cut ties, leave the relationship, decline the invitation, or set a boundary. You simply do it, quietly, consistently, without apology, and that silence, that decision not to explain, is a boundary in itself. It's a message that your peace is no longer up for negotiation. This is where growth becomes exponential. Every time you choose yourself, you build a new level of confidence. Not the loud, boastful kind, but the kind that shows up in the way you walk into a room without needing to prove anything. The kind that lets you enjoy your own company. The kind that keeps you from returning to what broke you, even when it tries to come back in prettier packaging. Because you've changed. You're not in the same place anymore emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And the world starts to respond to this change. Opportunities start to appear where you once saw obstacles. Relationships shift, some fall apart, others deepen. You begin to attract people who recognize your value without you having to highlight it. Why? Because your energy has changed. You're no longer broadcasting your need to be seen. You are simply showing up fully as yourself, whole, focused, silent, but present, and that is powerful. The things you were chasing. Many of them start chasing you. The love you were begging for. It starts to arrive in healthier forms because you're finally aligned with the version of you that knows how to receive it. The peace you couldn't find. It's been with you all along. Hidden beneath the noise you've now learned to silence. The direction you were so desperately seeking. It reveals itself when your mind is no longer cluttered with drama, distractions, or doubt. So this is your invitation. Pull back, pour in, focus on your habits, your healing, your happiness. Let the silence speak. Let your growth be the loudest thing about you. You don't need to post about it, prove it, or justify it. Just live it. Let your discipline become your legacy. Let your peace become your filter. And let the world adjust to your new frequency, the one built in silence, but rooted in power. The most beautiful part of going silent and focusing on yourself is realizing that the universe or life itself begins to align with your quiet commitment. The things you once begged for, worried about, or felt anxious chasing begin to flow toward you with less resistance. That's not a coincidence. That's the result of energy no longer being scattered in a million directions. It's the reward of presence, of discipline, of deep inner alignment. When you stop leaking your energy into conversations that go nowhere, arguments that steal your peace, and people who drain your spirit, something extraordinary begins to happen. Space opens up, and in that space, clarity enters. This is what most people miss. They think silence is passive, that pulling back means giving up, but it's the opposite. Silence is intentional. It's a strategic pause that lets you realign, refocus, and rebuild from the inside out. When you stay quiet long enough, you begin to hear what truly matters. You start to feel your intuition again. You trust your gut. You see who shows up without you reaching. You learn who respects your boundaries without needing constant reminders. And more importantly, you learn to trust yourself to walk away from what no longer feeds your soul. There's something unshakable about a person who's done the inner work. When you've gone through the fire of healing, silence becomes your power tool. You're not quick to respond. You're not desperate to defend. You understand the value of peace, and you protect it like a fortress. You no longer settle for chaos dressed as excitement. You choose calm. You choose clarity. You choose growth, not because it's easy, but because you finally understand that nothing external can give you what you've built within. And while the world may not notice your transformation immediately, it always catches up. Eventually, people begin to sense the difference in how you show up. You don't flinch when someone tries to trigger you. You don't chase after what walks away. You don't lower your standards out of fear of being alone. You don't engage in what doesn't elevate you. And that subtle shift in behavior sends a loud message. You are no longer available for anything that disrupts your progress. As you focus inward and move silently, opportunities that match your new mindset start to appear. The relationships you attract feel more authentic. The goals you once struggled to reach start to unfold with more grace. You're not working harder, you're working smarter, from a place of alignment instead of urgency. You're choosing actions that serve your future self, not just your current comfort. And every small step you take in silence builds momentum toward a life that feels more like you. This is the kind of success that lasts. Because it's not built on validation, hype, or performance. It's built on truth, your truth, the kind that doesn't need to be shouted from rooftops to be real, the kind that stands strong even when no one's watching. And this is where everything finally begins to fall into place, not because you forced it, but because you trusted the process, because you trusted yourself, and that trust made you unstoppable. So stay silent when you need to. Pull back when your spirit calls for it. Don't let the noise of the world rush your journey. What's meant for you isn't going to pass you by because you took time to heal, reflect, and realign. In fact, the more you honor that inner work, the more powerfully life responds. Because when you focus on yourself and stay silent, you don't just find peace, you find the path that was always yours. And finally, everything begins to fall exactly where it belongs.